The Golden Cage. Chapter 2. There are shades of grey that result from mixing up black lines with white dots. They are silent. There is a chronic, internalized war weakening the country under your surface, my dear friend. She'll be right, they say. She always is. My daughter Sophia was born here. She is the result of a connection between an Australian-born man and an indigenous Sardinian woman. She is blameless. Sophia has been taught both ways, both languages and traditions. She will choose and decide how to move steps in her personal path. We owe her the truth and knowledge to stand strong. She will definitely be right. After nearly 6 years, I recently went back to the island I belonged to, Sardinia. That was the longest separation between us. I was able to re-experience the place, the connection and the relationships with my family, the land and the culture was the healthiest boost, just what I needed and craved. The chronic pain that was sitting on my chest for over a year has now dissipated. Sardinia represents my primary identification. Within the place there is meaning and informs me of who I am, where I come from, as it has been the background of my growth. You know what I'm talking about, Australia, as you have been the place, the connection, the country for so many years and so many people and families. Connection to place is a deeply human trait. Yet, for some people, this connection is stronger than for others. I was born Sardinian, and I will leave this flesh as a Sardinian woman, no matter what the colours on my passports tell you. It was amazing to spend time with my father and his intimate knowledge of the land and seasons and how to find food. It was just like the old days, a piece of history repeating itself. Sardinians grow old. I'm sure a great part is related to that knowledge and a deep respect for the cycles of the land, the sea and the sky. My grandfather was illiterate, but he could read the moon and guess the weather forecast. He shared with me the biggest secret: to pray when planting seeds, to bless nature's gift and always thank the bigger guy in the sky. All my grandparents passed on to me a sense of faith. Even though we have known each other for a while, I haven't been completely honest with you, Australia. I've had to hide my spiritual and emotional connection to the land, family and culture for the fear of judgment and criticism. I know you meant well, but still. Do you remember when during the first 12 months with you, I went around interviewing Sardinian migrants that came to you in the 50s and 60s? I saw tears creating little rivers on some of the now old faces when they were cautiously telling me that they had to give up their Italian citizenship to be able to enroll in some jobs. They had to become Australians, prove their loyalty to you. It could have been worse. The birth certificate could have declared they were flora and fauna. At least they were not classified as animals, thank goodness. They just had to advance and jump onto the Australian fair wagon. It hurt then, and it hurts now. Years later, they fought to regain their Italian citizenship, especially since it is gained by blood. They wanted their kids to know where they came from. We all came here as strangers and foreigners, at least to you, Australia. To reinstate the Golden Cage, we have been showing off our success at work and how much money we make and how many houses we bought. We need pride. perhaps innocent, still part of a repeated mistake, silently standing on the greyish colours, reconfirming the denial of history and polishing the blindness. Let's just shine and share stories of successful migrants. Or maybe not. It is not all golden when you look at the cage from inside. Come on, let's face it. Who in their sane mind would want to have uncomfortable conversations? Nobody likes to talk about painful things. That's where the short memory brings relief. Sweet. The knots are so messily entangled that honestly, why bother? Australia, forget the past and let's get on with the brighter future. How can stories about the same history be so different? Australia, who are you? It took me years of reflection to pick which version I should believe. Applying basic knowledge and the right quantity of common sense, it is doubtful whether a single culture could have endured and survived over such a diverse personality as yours, Australia. I'm sure you watched many ways of living. When showing off your changes in your natural conditions, many thousands of inhabitants had to adapt to your moods and demands. Sardinia, on the other hand, is way smaller than you, but still witnessed enough people, tribes, invaders, indigenous, merchants and practices. We are told my ancestors fought for thousands of years. Sometimes they had to band, sometimes they gained independence in an eternal game of human evolution. The signs of ancient civilizations are still there. Such a stubborn land that cannot move away from the past, but instead decided to preserve it and make it a strong pillar to admire in the present and hopefully in the future. On an island that is 350 kilometers long, 5 main languages are still spoken, with many sub-dialects. I would fall in error if I told you I speak Sardinian, as in reality I speak Campidanese, from the plain region called Campirano. 4 k's out of my village, you arrive in another town where they speak very similarly, but with differences. We have different costumes and traditional clothes. Each town has different colors. I was told who and where I belonged to, surrounded by an abundant diversity, islands within the island. Until I landed here on the old land, I had never heard of people denying and hiding their roots. I have to admit, I got confused. At first, I struggled to understand. It was also the first time I came so close to a place where people were so different from me. The things I thought were obvious weren't anymore. Like when I asked people where they are from, young or old, they would give me the same answer. Australia. But where in Australia? Where do you belong to? What place influenced your growth most? What about your people? The look in their face only told me that I was asking a strange question. It is my fault. I do have a lot of questions. Is that why you brought me here, Australia? My questions and their answers have been a good reflection on how we regard your history. It also continues to influence the relationships today with identity, with place and communities. I needed those answers because I have to consider what I tell Sophia. She is a non-Aboriginal Australian. She belongs to this land as much as she belongs to Sardinia through my womb, my DNA, my storytelling and her visitations to the place, where she also has relationships and connections. I believe that just like me, she will have space for two places, two hearts. Sophia started attending the local state school, and every Friday the assembly is opened by the playing of the national anthem, with an intro of didgeridoo. I call it the sugar coating around the words. I always tell my child that words are powerful and meaningful. Pick them wisely. Watching her being taught by people still foreign to me, I got to realize that history is not just about facts and dates. It is more about what it feels like inside the skin of facts. It is the diverse human experience that requires the bigger attention. You watched me raising a bilingual daughter. For years, I received some looks. I heard harsh English, speak Australian. I even received concerns from random people at the park. Some were family members from my husband's side. They told me I was only going to confuse her, the poor child. What was I thinking? I grew up bilingual myself, and then studied other 3 foreign languages, several dialects, and Latin. I'm not confident in ancient Greek, as I have a very poor vocabulary. So, that might be the reason I get confused about what is actually happening here with you, Australia. And who are we together? I think when you called me here, you already knew what happened in Sardinia during the times events were massively changing your shape. The 18th and 19th centuries broke a cycle in history of the wider humanity. Seeds of nationalism were planted. We were an island with our own identity, traditions and languages. But then an outsider manpower took over. We became crown land. They called it the Kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia. Very bittersweet. He wasn't our king. Sardinian land was used as a stepping stone until in 1861 the Kingdom of Italy was unified. And you know what they said? We made Italy. Now we need to make Italians. It took 100 years to homogenize and teach the people the one language, Italian. People were convinced to abandon the old ways so they would become better, modern, and more civilized. Something similar happened all around Europe. Early 1900s, these newly founded states were full of testosterone and had to prove their strengths, prove to the others what they were capable of. Acting like teenagers, pushing away parents, thinking they know better, as they're holding the future in their sticky hands. So they exploded in a first huge conflict, which led dramatically into a second one. You were down here, Australia, far from it all. But because of your adopted grandparents' shadow still on you, your fresh citizens got involved. And that's when colour didn't really matter. We unforgivably wounded each other in Europe, whilst your wound just got deeper. Once again, people were judged for their beliefs, colour, lifestyle. Oh, come on, history, not again. Your inner strength, Australia, was weakened. You had people sent to fight for rights, while some of your own had been receiving special treatment. A very special treatment then that caused another type of special treatment now. People made plans. They came all the way here, facing fatal shores, storms, seasickness, disease. They travelled a long distance in search of resources and new opportunities until they finally found you What a relief. There has been a constant in the history of humanity. Battles, wars, kingdoms, independence, more conquering, colonizations, decolonizations, religious wars, or so we're told. Just like kids, always fighting for possessions. Mine! No, that's mine, but I want it, but I had it first! A flat line with bad events, one after the other. Is that it? Is that what humanity and history is all about? My dear friend Australia, with your breakup and conflict still fresh, I could feel more than what I gained reading thousands of pages of paper. This is still present. It's not water under the bridge, even if the majority wishes so. I have been digging in the past, looking for answers to know myself more, looking for tools and ancient ways. I can safely say that a big part of me always felt closer to the old you. Let's call it your darker side, wrapped around a multitude of diverse, ancient cultures. How could you let yourself disappear? Were you so weak and inferior as they described you? They didn't even mention there was ever a war between settlers and your first inhabitants. They were just rebellions. Those strange spirits wouldn't be capable of fighting wars like men and for over 2 centuries. It was on the cards that the Pusha culture, or a mix of a few, with greater manpower and more advanced deadly weapons, won. I mean, did you ever think those nude people had a chance? If they were so uncivilized, still believing in Mother Earth and Father Sky, a sort of dream time, and clearly had no clue of the economic opportunity of that land they lived on for over 50,000 years, what did they expect? Those indigenous people failed to recognize the potential of that land. Or so we are repeatedly told. Whatever they did definitely wasn't recognizable as civilized or permanent. They had no apparent law, no kings, no queens, no aspirations. Nothing. They were an obstacle to those exhausted travelers and their more specific expectations. Nonetheless, over time, your biological family failed to completely disappear, despite all the effective attempts to dismantle their social fabric and their links to land, and their links to you, my dear. Australia, you're a hell of a lucky country, and this we will remember, lest we forget. Putting things into perspective is hard, Yaka. It can be socially disruptive and emotionally overwhelming. It is easier just to answer, yeah, good mate. Imagine if people would ask, how you doing? And they would be given a true answer. I'm just trying to figure out what happened, how it happened, why they're angry, why we dislike each other, why they're so ungrateful, and burnt down all the houses we built for them. I was born here, I belong here. I have the right to claim this place. Who do they think they are? Is it all about them? Just get over it, mate. What about my great-grandfather, maybe a convict or a settler, no doubt a simple, peaceful, hard worker that just built this nation? Unbelievable. What about you, mate? Yeah, nah, living the dream. The Australian dream, built on someone else's ashes. But who cares? And why should we? I know why you brought me down here, Australia. You took me away from my mum. She couldn't come to my wedding or the birth of her granddaughter like the rest of my people. You brought me here because of my big heart, my stubbornness in looking for details to put things in perspective. All right, I have work to do. I can understand the connection to our self-identity, the attachment to our roots, connection with the environment. I can be peaceful, but I can fight hard for a greater cause. I believe in restoring respect, in building positive relationships between groups or individuals that have a history of discord. I have been trained to uncover and come to terms with our pasts as a collective and as families. I know what it feels like to internalize an image of inferiority. I believe it is time to leave the power aside and correct injustices, but for real, with respect for cultures, for the different. All around, I have seen you struggling, watching men behaving like helpless kids, fighting and hating each other. Or was it all part of a mad, bigger plan? Because it looks like just a big social experiment, just saying. With the result of trauma, grief and loss, denial for successive generations. An abundance of experiences of dispossessions, racism, exclusion, forced inclusion, denigration, illusion, dreaming. The common trait for many years has been the denial of self. The traditional custodians wouldn't be themselves. They couldn't. They had to adapt and be part of the assimilation. The European settlers had to become Australians and join the process of assimilation. 1st of January 1900. Happy birthday! You were officially born. They made you Australia, so they needed to make Australians. Strangely sounds familiar. Most of the settlers forgot about their motherland. Why couldn't the Aboriginals? That stubborn, resistant, small percentage. They are like a mosquito. Instead, they decided to assume aggressive and resentful behavior, even amongst their own people. Everyone here was asked to make an effort and change their lifestyles, attitudes, languages, and traditions. They are a weird mob. They could have called you New Europe. At least they chose a pretty name. Australia. They gave you a fresh start. People just have to be careful not to fall into arguments, or it could get tricky. Whitewash the past, rinse the sins, wear a black armband, a white blindfold. Too hard. I'm too busy working and taking emotional painkillers. We won't remember them. Let's just forget.